Good evening, friends. My name is DiMarcio, and we're coming to you live from Lucid, Denver, where it is a beautiful 7 degrees outside, but we are nice. We are nice, toasty, and warm in here as we prepare this evening to have a conversation on race. I'd like to welcome you all to MLK to BLM, a unique discussion about the challenges that our community has faced. In a few moments, you'll be introduced to our set of panelists, but before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to the owner of Lucid Denver, Mr. Sage Gray.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thank you all for being here and weathering the storm, and thank you to those who are viewing the live stream. I appreciate it very much. I'm excited to have you guys. Hopefully this will be one of many conversations we'll have here at Lucid. I am the owner here, as well as used to work with One Colorado, was on the board of directors for Alexander Foundation, and worked for a sexual assault services organization, and that really gave me the inspiration to continuously use this space to have conversations and keep things moving forward instead of just always being a fun bar. But we're a fun bar too, so keep coming back to see us. But this conversation really struck because, BLM happened, and it's been trying to happen for a long time, but we haven't really put in the effort that we need to yet. And then when COVID happened, people were locked inside, and it took everybody being stuck inside to really come out and find a reason to protest. And I just don't want us to go back to not moving forward, because we've literally gone from black and white television and Martin Luther King to now, and with how much people have been fighting and how important this is, we've not made the changes that need to happen. And so, to me, the way we do that is by really having conversations, even when they're uncomfortable and are hard, because we all have different perspectives. But I'm so excited you guys are here, and I welcome you to this conversation. And with that, my good friend Morris Price here is going to take it away.
First of all, I want to thank Sage again for offering to do this, not only in his bar, but it was Sage's idea to have a community conversation. So Sage, thank you again for hosting us. Thank our robust audience for coming out in the tundra. I'm Morris Price, and professionally I serve as the Vice President of Grants for the Colorado Trust. We are a health equity foundation through a racial equity lens. I consider myself a community optimist. I used to work for the Gill Foundation. I ran the congressional office for Congressman Diane DeGette, and I was proud to serve as the GLBT Center's Board of Directors for a number of terms. My interest in this is the community conversation. That's why this is not sponsored by an organization. That's why I'm proud to say, thought as a community member, I want to have a conversation. It doesn't have to be formally structured. It doesn't have to be funded. It doesn't have to have a whole lot of prep. It's community conversation. When you think about the gay and lesbian community historically, that's how we came together. And the gay bar is often the central place for those conversations, as well as the people on our panel who I'm going to introduce shortly, breaking stereotypes. It's easy to want to lump us all into one category, but when I think about how my life has been impacted in the last year around conversations on race, I've lost my best friend of 40 years who thought we were on the same page, and we were not. I was in Los Angeles driving, and my ex-partner says, well, why are you driving 5 degrees slower in Burbank? I said, because I'm a black man driving an $86,000 car, and he doesn't know or care about how many degrees I have or what my 6-figure income is. That as much as people think have changed, in the real world for some, it has not. But that's my perspective. I sit on 2 boards. On the Rose Community Foundation board, I am left of center. At my office, I am right of center. But my values are the same. So we want to find a perspective that fares where are you on this issue, and leave here not with one idea of success, but leaving here believing that the best success is that the communication and the conversations are going to continue. So I'm thankful that you're here, and I'm going to take the time now to introduce our panelists. So joining us also is Nadine Bridges, the Executive Director of One Colorado, the statewide advocacy organization. Barbara Gabriel, a professor at Metropolitan State University of Denver. And Valdemar Archuleta, who's the president of the Log Cabin Republicans. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to our host and MC and my good friend, Hashim Coates.
So I'm sorry, I gotta do the whole black church thing and adjust the mic. But yes, my name is Hashim Coates. I am a Colorado native, and I also do political consulting and political organizing. Sorry, I'm the mic. All right, I'm good now. I do political consulting and political organizing. I also do community activism as well. So it's my pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We're gonna go ahead and start off tonight's discussion with Nadine, and we're gonna talk about one of the topics that you've heard about, but you might not know what all it encompasses, or from the words of the title alone, unconscious bias. So Nadine, go ahead and please talk to the people and break that down for them.
Can you all hear me? Oh, now can you hear me? All right. Yeah, so unconscious bias. I like to describe it as the unseen behaviors that we have towards other people. So as soon as you're born at the hospital, whether they look at your gender or your race, there's all these preconceived ideas of who you are. And as you build up and move throughout your life, there's different behaviors and attitudes that happen that that cause you to treat people in different ways. So you might see somebody with a disability, and because you've been taught that that person is extraordinary or not extraordinary, you might treat them differently. Or you may see someone who is Black, and because of the preconceived ideas and social constructs of what is happening around Black people, you may treat them differently. And the whole thing around this is that if you don't hold yourself accountable to I always say that you have a first thought, a second thought, and a third thought. You see someone, you have a first thought. Hold on to that thought. Hit your second thought, hold on to that one, and your third thought should be it's how you treat that person, right? It's not the thought that you saw on TV. It's not the behavior that you saw in the news. It is that person genuinely having a conversation with you, and then you authentically have a conversation back, and then you meet somewhere in the middle. And a lot of times we don't do that. And that's where we need to make the change, right? You need to start thinking about the narratives that other people teach you, and you need to start creating your own narratives about the individual person, and then share. If you don't like the person, cool, then you don't like that person. But it shouldn't just be because you see them and you have an idea of who they are. It should be that you actually took the time to meet with them, have a conversation with them, and then decide whether you want to move forward and move back from that person.
All right, so thank you for that, Nadine, and I know that might be a little heavy for people there, but as it relates to unconscious bias, it's basically the things that we're taught without necessarily being direct, but us getting out of our own way.
Right.
Can we truly work ourselves out of unconscious bias?
No.
Okay.
No, you can't truly, you really can't. Like that, again, that's the idea of having a first thought and a second thought. There's always going to be some type of narrative there. I can tell you for myself, I was raised, my biological mom is Black, but the woman who raised me is white. And growing up in a neighborhood that was predominantly white, there was only 3 Black kids in my school, and I was one of them. It took a long time for folks not to assume that I was something else. It took them a long time. I was like a nerdy kid that played the flute in chess, y'all. But everybody at my school thought I was something different, right? And I had to work hard to be who I was and not be who they wanted me to be. And as I got older, a lot of those folks would say to me like, oh, I thought, they used to call me Big Bad Nadine as a kid. I don't know why, I just said I played the flute and chess, right? But the reason why is because there were all these stereotypes out there of who they thought I was supposed to be. And now, as an adult, they see like, oh man, I always thought you were this, but you're not that, right? You have to change your thought and your process. You need to meet someone where they are, figure out those commonalities, and not operate off of assumptions. Imagine what my life would have been if they hadn't treated me that way when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Imagine what it would have been if they didn't listen to what other people were saying about who I was and really just got to meet me as the nerdy little kid that I was, listening to watching Star Trek and doing all that weird stuff, which I think is awesome stuff, right? And
right.
yeah. But the thing is like that is it. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It's really about meeting the human condition, having respect for the human condition. If your heart beats with mine, then we can connect. If your heart doesn't, then I don't want anything to do with you. But I might still have a conversation with you That is changing that unconscious bias. But it's always going to be in your back in your mind, and you're always going to make assumptions about someone, but you have to be accountable to it because you don't want to cause harm. I always say 1,000 paper cuts to the soul is worse than a punch in the face. And every time you treat somebody differently because of the fact that you just see them and you have an idea about their stereotypes, you are causing 1,000 paper cuts to that soul, and that is unacceptable.
Thank you. Thank you. So you spoke about your childhood as it relates to being viewed differently. How did that help shape the work that you do now as executive director of One Colorado, which is a marginalized, it's an entity for marginalized groups, but within inside of that marginalization, there's more marginalization.
Well, yeah, I think, well, there's two questions
Yeah.
here. Well, I think being brought up in a family where, my dad always said that it's important to, say hi to the older adult, speak to the unhoused person because you might be the only person that speaks to them that day, is something that I carry with me every day. So in the work that I do at One Colorado, it's the same thing. It's connecting with our most vulnerable communities and uplifting them and creating an opportunity for them to thrive. I think the issue within the LGBTQ community is that we've been treated as a monolith. For some reason, we think that we are all the same, and that is not the case. There are folks in our community whose voices have not been heard, and even though One Colorado has done incredible amount of work for marriage equality, access to PrEP and PEP, anti-bullying laws, there are still many folks in our community, older adults, folks with disabilities, transgender, non-binary, gender expansive folks, black and brown folks who have not felt heard. And so a part of my job is to say hi and to build those connections and create opportunity for those voices to be amplified so that when we say equality for all LGBTQ Coloradans, we mean it. Not that we haven't meant it in the past, but that we continue to mean it and that it's sustainable for our communities. Because we're a leader. A lot of folks are looking at us to see what we do, and we can do a better job so that collectively we're moving forward, and it's not just a selected group of us that are moving forward. So.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Nadine, thank you very much for that.
Absolutely.
If people want to reach you to find out more information about you and your organization, they would go to
onecolorado.org.
All right.
So,
all right. Well, thank you very much for that.
yeah, thank you.
All right.
So now you all see what we're talking about tonight. We are hitting some deep and heavy topics, and I want to rewind just a bit and look at Denver, our city that we live in, from a more historical aspect. And if, Ms. Barbara Gabriel, if I could steal your attention for just a moment. I know you had some thoughts to share in regards to the city from a historical, racial standpoint.
Historian, and I'm representing, old white people here. So we go into history a lot because, as I tell my students, I am history. Okay, I don't really need a book. I just want to put this in some kind of perspective as far as looking at race and gender and so on and so forth. I want to start with the year I was born. Now he knows how old I am. In the year I was born, segregation was legal in the United States. In the year I was born, lynchings and mob violence were everyday occurrences in the Midwest and the South. In the year I was born, Japanese Americans had just been released, 120,000 of them, from concentration camps in the United States 2 years earlier. In the year I was born, 3 years before that, Mexican-American heroes of World War II could not be buried in Texas in white cemeteries. In the year I was born, homosexual acts were illegal, and people were hounded and fired for that. For those of you who know any history, Alan Turing in England, who was one of the people that worked code breaking during World War II, he invented basically the prototype of the computer. He was accused of homosexual acts, and he was forced to basically take estrogen, and I know what a bitch that is, to basically castrate. He killed himself. He committed suicide because he was gay. This was illegal. As we know, 2 years before I was born, concentration camps were liberated by African American soldiers, white soldiers, Mexican American soldiers, And it wasn't just Jews who died, it was homosexuals, it was gays, it was people of color. They were in tartute. They were degenerate. So the year I was born, this was a very different world to live in, this entire country and this entire world. So there is such a thing as progress. However, there's also such a thing as backlash, which is what I think we're looking at now. And that's what horrifies me, that we are heading backwards as far as rights for people who are different. And this is my concern. Again, I'm a older, white, straight, everything that is, privileged. I have white privilege. And I choose to use my white privilege to help people who don't have that privilege. And I will stand up for anybody that has been unjustly treated. So I'm an ally is what I'm trying to say. I'm an ally for anyone who deserves justice, which is all of us. So I just want to put that in a historical perspective and bring you all down, basically. That's what I do in my history classes. I tell them all this really deep and depressing shit. Did I just say shit? Oh, so sorry. Damn. Okay. Anyway, thank you, DeMarcio.
Thank you, Barbara. Tonight is a night of real talk. It's real discussion. I mean, from unconscious bias and with respect to age, you bring up such a great point that 70 years ago, the entire world...
74.
I was trying to be kind. 70 plus years ago. See, I wouldn't have known if she hadn't told me earlier, but 70 plus years ago, the world was a completely different place and space for so many of us. As a former student of yours, I remember...
live long enough, you get everybody.
Eventually. Things were very different when I was in your class coming out. I mean, when Hashim and I met back in the 1900s, last century, we were hanging around. We used to go to drag clubs.
Yes.
And to see the different drag performers, and things have obviously changed since then. But speaking of drag performers, we've actually got one of Denver's own. Miss Evie Oddly, I believe, has a message that she has sent our way, and we'd like to share that with you now.
Howdy, y'all. It's your former local turned global superstar, Evie Oddly, and I wish I could be there with y'all. I have to say really quickly that I am so proud of the work that Denver as a city is doing to advance people of color and marginalized communities within our queer spaces. And the fight is not over, but I have to say it's come leagues since I was a twinkling wandering about. So, thank you for having me here. Thank you for doing the good work. And I would like to take a minute to talk to you about unconscious bias. Now, unconscious bias, as the name states, is really just all of the thoughts and projections and stereotypes that you can have about any group of people without even really thinking about it. It's a societally trained thing where you gain these biases by learning behaviors from other people. Like, if you're only ever shown black people as robbers and thieves and gangsters, then you might have an unconscious bias about what it's like to be around black people, about what black people even do, exist, and be. And that's why it's really important for us as a community to address the unconscious biases that we all already have within us. And this isn't to say that anyone is inherently wrong or evil bad or racist, but we all do have these unconscious biases that we were taught because we grew up in a country that isn't perfect and that has a long way to go with its race relations. So, if you don't think you have unconscious bias, I'd like you to do something. I'd like you to look at your group of friends, your really close group of friends. How many of them are the same race as you? How many of them are around the same age as you? How many of them are around the same social status or income as you? How many of them are the same gender as you? And if you look at that close group of people that you interact with, more often than not, we find that people are relating and associating to people who check off so many things of being similar to you. And that in itself is an unconscious bias about how to operate in the world. Now, I'm not saying that's everyone. I think we live in 2022. It's a big, perfect world where we're all doing a lot better work. But that's just an example. Now, unconscious bias can be a helpful tool in our basic survival. Like, we should be biased to think that that big, scary looking wildcat over there might eat us. However, it's our job as intelligent creatures who are beyond just surviving big wildcats eating us to question the world around us and question whether or not we are living still in a system that oppresses people and that builds prejudices into our brains before we even come to realize it. So, I wish I could be here for this panel discussion, but make sure y'all stick around after the show for Juicy's Jukebox, where you can learn a little bit more about Black history. And on that note, back to you, DeMarcio.
That was good. We didn't even rehearse that either. That was very nice. From a performance standpoint, why don't we break up the energy just a bit? And I'd like to welcome to the stage one of Lucid Denver's resident performers. This is Miss Samora Cash.
I say to you this morning that if you have never found something so dear and so precious to you that you will die for it, then you aren't fit to live. Make it plain. Make it plain. You may be 38 years old as I happen to be. And one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls upon you to stand up for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause. And you refuse to do it because you are afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you will lose your job, or you're afraid that you will be criticized, or that you will lose your popularity. Are you afraid that somebody will stab you or shoot at you or bomb your house? And so you refuse to take the stand. Well, you may go on and live until you are 90, but you are just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit. You died when you refused to stand up for right. You died when you refused to stand up for truth. You died when you refused to stand up for justice.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun, weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna can feel it in my early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna start moving towards that separating line. I'm waiting through mighty waters. You know I gotta make up mind. And I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation. And I'll fight with the strength that I got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. You hear freedom calling, calling me to answer. Gonna keep on keeping on. And I know what's on the bend might be hard to face 'cause I'm alone. And I just might fail, but Lord knows I'll try. She stays with stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. I hear freedom calling, calling me to answer. Gonna keep on keeping on. Can feel it in my bones. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you.
Give it up for some more cash.
Let's thank our performer once again, please. I think you can see why this is not your typical conversation. And we want to move next to the next topic. And the next topic is on cancel culture. And to ensure that we have a wide diversity of perspective and voices, because we're not a monolithic conversation community, we've invited Valdemar Archuleta. He is the president of the Colorado Log Cabin Republicans. And in inviting Valdemar, I remember where I was speaking with one of my former grantees, Bishop Yvette Flunder, who was a lesbian bishop at UCC Church, who says, if the people you spend all your time with, if the person you wake up next to looks like you, thinks like you, and dressed like you, one of you doesn't belong in that relationship. I think the same thing was said for this conversation. So I want to thank Valdemar for being here and open up the conversation to him on cancel culture.
Well, thank you. And I thank all of you for having me here and allowing me to be a part of this conversation. I think that cancel culture is a hard one, even especially for me. I love freedom. Freedom is huge to me. freedom is the most important thing I feel like I fight for, or I want to fight for, or I want to maintain. And so cancel culture is one where I do think, though, there is a balance, because sometimes we do need to hold people accountable for stupid crap that they do. You know, sometimes it's a consequence of a stupid action results in you being canceled. And a lot of times those terms, we just use a blanket term to focus on everything. But at the same time, I also do feel we do need to protect that freedom. And there are times where I think maybe it can go too far, where we become too sensitive on certain subjects. And we do need to take a perspective of other people. And I think in the next section, when we talk about some other things, we'll focus on this a little more. But one thing I wanted to talk about, I'm a Native American, and I have a lot of family who loved the Redskins. And they loved the Redskins because of the logo. That was the reason they liked the Redskins. And if you look at the history of the Redskins, the logo came about because of a group of Native Americans. A man who was the president of a Native American association got the idea to do this. They found a Blackfoot artist who used a Blackfoot model to create this logo. And the team at the time had several Native Americans on it. And I think sometimes we forget to, when the conversation comes up and someone's offended by something, we almost feel it's easier to cancel it than to educate someone on why it is the way it is. And so I think sometimes we do need to step back and do that with these situations. But again, it is something that there does have to be a balance between. And like I said, it's probably the libertarian side of me where I feel like everything should be legal all the time. And obviously that's a little crazy. But we do need to fight for that freedom of speech as well, because we need to be able to have conversations like this. And if we create a wall where if you say the wrong thing or ask the wrong question, you're going to be canceled, people aren't going to ask questions, they're not going to have conversations, and they're going to remain ignorant. I have family who live on native land, and sometimes people will ask me about it. And someone will ask, do your family still live in teepees? That may be an ignorant question, but if it's sincere, they sincerely just do not know. What is it like on a reservation? Or if I am to jump down their throat, start calling them names and berating them for asking such a question, they're going to remain ignorant and never ask another question to me again. So it's important to say, all right, you asked a question. In my head, I think that's a little stupid to ask that question, but if you don't know, how are you going to learn? So I'll talk to them, right? Here's what it's like. No, they don't live in teepees anymore. There is a teepee there, but it's more for show than for for living in. And you just explain to them, this is the way it is. Because people, then they're going to feel comfortable talking to you. All right, now what about this? What about that? And you can educate people on your history, on other topics. So I do think with cancel culture, we just need to be careful that we're not so quick to take offense and not look at the other side, that we put walls between our cultures or between people rather than coming together. And so that's kind of my take on cancel culture.
Well, thank you for that. So we have had two different panelists speak before we had a series of questions, and I think I like this pairing because we have someone who teaches history and then someone who has made some statements that are maybe need to be historically fact checked or historically referenced as to how that relates. So you made the comment of the Washington Redskins and how that logo was there. Yeah. Is there any type of historical reference to how the term Redskins came to be? And if there's any type of negative connotation that came along with that as well.
There is a negative connotation, but that actually came about later. Native Americans themselves started calling themselves Redskins, and that's how the term started. And it was kind of, I don't know, it's kind of weird, and it depends. One thing I will say as a caution that a lot of people use when referring to Native Americans, they'll say Native Americans believe or Native Americans think there are over 100 different tribes of nations here that all have very different cultures, languages, and beliefs. So I'm not going to speak for all Native Americans because I do know there are some who may find that image offensive. And you can't, that's why I say cancel culture is a hard thing. You do have to have hard conversations, and you have to balance that. I personally believe we should err on the side of freedom and having conversations rather than instantly giving in to things. And not that it was an instant give-in, but that you asked about the history of the term Redskins.
Right.
And I said originally that's kind of how it came to be. We called ourselves Redskins.
Okay. And forgive me for not clarifying. That was more directed towards the one trained in history
Yes, well, that
to provide that response. But I do appreciate you providing that as well. Yes.
He did that. He got it. You got it. Well done, you. That's another 100 for him in the
Okay,
grade book.
so-
Well done, yes.
All right. So if you want to sum it up with what he said, that's perfectly fine. But so it leads me to my next thing. I want to give some pushback. And it's pushback, as you said, to progress. We've made progress. And have we made progress? And if we have made progress, I only feel that we made progress as it relates to the words that we use. How slavery is no longer a thing unless you're in prison or unless you're in debt. And how lynching is still, they never really passed that anti-lynching bill.
No, they didn't.
Right, so we really don't have the legal protections of anti-lynching, which should basically be common sense. So how much progress have we actually made from those historical points that you gave
Well,
us?
as everybody knows, I'm a pretty depressed person as far as history. But what I wanted to show you is that there is progress as far as laws.
Okay.
But as you know, okay, laws are the first step. You do not change culture as rapidly as you change laws. And we're looking at what's going on right now with voting rights. What's going on in many states, 30-something states right now, trying to deny voting rights to people of color, basically. It's very obvious. But federally, they have protection, or do they? Because the Supreme Court gutted the voting rights bill in 2013. The voting rights bill that was passed the year I graduated from high school, and then it's been reversed. So what you're seeing is, yes, there's progress, but progress, you can't, most of you in here are activists. I've been an activist for a long time. You cannot just say that's done, that's accomplished, because if you do, it will come right back around again. And that's I think, what we're all here to talk about. How can we keep that from happening? So I believe in progress. I'm proud of the people that have fought and died for the steps ahead that we have. But the fight is not over. It's not over for people of color. It's not over for people like me who believe in justice.
Right.
So I'm rambling because
No,
that's
no,
what
you're fine.
historians do. We just ramble on and put it in a book and sell it to you.
Right,
Go
right.
ahead.
So I definitely agree with what you said. And for me, I would like to use the word, or maybe the phrase, there's been movement. Right? And I can't really say that it's progress, it's just movement as we're moving around. Because now that we see that the movement that has happened from when my grandparents were here and their grandparents were here, the language and the laws of progress are actually being flipped. If we look at what's happening as far as it relates to affirmative action, which was something that was done to help equal or help balance out the harms that were done to non-white communities, studies have shown that white women have been the largest benefactor of affirmative action. And back up a little bit, affirmative action was really created for white men to allow the poor white men to have the same opportunity as the rich white men. And then the white women were the largest benefactors of that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So now the Supreme Court faces a case where affirmative action was still safe in one institution, and that of higher education, where it now might actually be gutted.
Yes.
So this is why I challenge the word progress, and tell people that we've only made movement on that.
Okay, and I do agree. I agree with you, but I still believe, because I have to. I'm a really cynical historian, but
understand.
I have to have hope.
Yeah, sometimes
progress
that's what we
to
have
me
to have to wake up sometimes,
Yes.
is that hope.
But you can call it movement. I can call it progress.
Gotcha. So also, I know we're going to transition on, but my phone has been blowing up with the thing we talk about historical and progress. We have to talk about the elephant that's in the room. Gay Republican. No.
Me?
The gay Republican. Like,
I'm literally the elephant in the room.
Oh, you are. How cute is that?
so would you like to talk about that and give people an explanation on that and talk about maybe how often the historical context of the Republican Party from its conception or creation and how it's changed throughout the years up into what we see today?
Actually, I have a T-shirt. Did I turn this off? No, I think it's still on. I have a T-shirt that says "I'm the elephant in the room," but I don't want to veer too far from the topic. But I am a Latino, Native American, gay Republican, and people wonder why. And a lot of that, I think, is almost the same things that we're talking about. We have a bias towards people. When someone thinks Republican, you automatically think of one type of person. And I will tell you, as a gay, Latino, Native American Republican here in Colorado, I've met Republicans of all shapes, sizes, ethnicities, even beliefs. Like, there's a wide variety of beliefs even within the Republican Party. It's a very diverse party that does not get that representation for whatever reason. But I love it. Like I was talking about, to me, freedom is one of the most important things we have. And I feel like right now, freedom is under attack. So I was ready to fly up to Canada, actually. There's a Canadian flag on the back of my car right now because I think that the danger of losing freedom is one of the things I'm most worried about. I want to make sure that the next generation of people have the freedom to have a conversation like this in a room. Going back to cancel culture, what we were talking about, I don't want there to come a time when the next generation's not allowed to speak because some of them aren't allowed to say certain things. It doesn't stop people from thinking those things. It just stops you from knowing who does think those things. So it is important, I think, that we hear these conversations. And as far as being a Republican, I feel like being part of a political parties are tools of proxy powered by numbers. You come together to get things done. I don't agree with everything the Republican Party stands for on their platform. I don't agree with all the Republicans, but I understand that if I really want to fight for freedom right now, I feel like that is the party that's best going to allow me to achieve that goal of having freedom.
You have no
All right.
platform. The Republican Party has no platform.
Well, all right. So they're setting up teasers right now for our next event. But yeah, just want to
I'll be there.
All right, awesome.
Me too, baby.
So right quick, short answers. How large is the log cabin Republicans, and what does that look like? Quickly.
Nationally, in the last year and a half, we went from 30 chapters to over 80 chapters. Here locally, we went from 16 members to over 50 in the past year.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. So you talked about protecting freedom of speech, and I definitely come from a class of people who would appreciate that, but we would talk more about that later in nuance. But right now, I'd like to welcome back to the stage to give interpretation of freedom of speech through performance. So welcome Samora Cash back to the stage.
Hello, good evening. I'm Samora Cash. I am one of the resident drag queens here at Lucid Denver. I just wanted to take a moment to take just a few seconds just to kind of talk a little bit more about cancel culture. I myself am a biracial drag queen, biracial person. I grew up with a black father and a white mother. So for me, I will never pretend or even try to speak on being a full person of color as far as black, because I personally don't know exactly the same struggles that I share with my fellow brothers and sisters who are black, but I have my own perspective on what that looks like as a biracial person, just living amongst us. As far as performance goes, a lot of times my life and like how I've moved throughout my life has definitely been with, I want to stand with my people. I want to stand with where I know that I'm supposed to be, and that's always been something that has been extremely important to me, and it's extremely important even in my performances. A lot of times I perform songs most of the time. I mean, anyone that has seen me perform knows that most of the time I perform Black artists pretty much all the time. And I've had people walk out of my shows. I've had people not understand, why is she wearing braids? Why is she, why is she doing Beyonce? Shouldn't she be doing Katy Perry? Like those are things that people really do say to me, and I've heard said behind my back. And it's important to me to use the little platform that I have. I've been doing drag here in Denver and just started doing drag here in Denver about 1.5 years ago. And in that time, I feel like I've come up in a time where I have met so many people of color, so many other Black entertainers here in Denver who embrace me, who we are able to kind of have those conversations that are sometimes harder to have, but they also never get in the way of allowing me to express my art form and express who I am as an artist here in Denver. So it's just super important for me to be able to continue to use my platform to speak out. I've dealt with situations as far as cancel culture goes with even family members. My mom and I haven't spoken in 2 years now. And a lot of that happened during the marches, and it kind of boiled down to the fact of trying to explain, I never thought I would have to explain who I am to my mother, but that's part of just kind of things that we go through in life. And it's been hard in the conversations that we've had. She's been like, but you're white, and that's always been her rebuttal to me, and it's been hard to get that point across sometimes that yes, while I am white, I'm also Black, and those are things that you have to see me, and you should see me as being your son and someone who you birthed, actually. So, but it's been important for me to, she actually called me, and I'll kind of round this up real quick, but she called me recently, and she wants to now have that conversation, and it kind of brings it back to that cancel culture of I could totally never speak to my mom again. I could be completely angry, and I could be upset, and I could look at that as just a loss, or I could spin it, and I could educate her on who we are as a Black community, who we are as biracial people, who we are, and what it is that we're trying to do and accomplish, and make waves in each and every city that we're a part of. So, it's just an interesting perspective from my end, but I thought it was important for me to kind of get up here and share a little bit of my perspective as a biracial artist, and I appreciate you taking the time to allow me to do so.
Thank you, Samora. I don't know about you all, but isn't it amazing what happens when we take just 5 minutes to listen to somebody else's story, to be empathetic and put ourselves in their shoes and learn something new? And thinking of something new, I'd like to welcome to the podium now Terrell Zara-Ray, Camp Scene Program Director of Youth Scene, and Kim Salvaggio, Chief DEI Officer at Rocky Mountain Public Media.
Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Thanks so much for having us. We are going to kind of piggyback on this whole cancel culture and talk a little bit more on so I had a list. I don't know if I'll go through it, but I have a list of terms that are appropriate and that are not appropriate. So we'll use one. Let's see. What should we use as an example? Yes.
Hi, I'm Kim Salvaggio. You pronounce my last name so well, thank you. Yes, Salvaggio. Very many people can't get that name right. So on our list, one of the things you'll see here is Oriental. So one of my closest friends is Korean. And when someone would say to her, "You're Oriental," you know what she would say? "I'm not a rug." So what do you say instead?
So we have Asian, Chinese, or Japanese. And if you don't know, guess what? Ask the question. That's a good way to start the conversation. If you don't know, or if you say something and you see somebody gets upset, ask them, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. What can I use instead of that? How can I not make this mistake again?" I think so often white folks get very afraid to ask those questions because sometimes we as people of color, we get upset when you say certain things to us. And we have that right because that's our experience. That's our experience, and our experience is very valid. And if someone gets upset, it's your job as a white person to do the work. We as black folks can't always educate you. We're not always in headspaces to educate you and tell you what you should be doing. You as a white person and that privilege that y'all are born into, that's what you need to use, and you need to go and do the work and educate yourself. Yes, sometimes you will find black folks that will be more than happy to educate you and help you out on that journey. But a lot of times you won't. And instead of getting upset and going back to that place of privilege, we talked about that, going back to that safe place of privilege, you have to go out and you have to do the work. I made somebody of color upset. What did I say? Replay that. What did I say? Go back and educate yourself and figure out why what you said was wrong or why what you did is wrong. But it is your responsibility because you were born into that privilege. Because you have that privilege, you now have to do the work. You have to take the burden off of our shoulders as queer black people and put that on your shoulders. So you have to go out there and do that work. And yes, it's real easy to go back and fall back in that place of privilege, that safe place, but you've got to push yourself to really make that effort and do things for yourself.
Thank you. So, white allies, you've heard this, right? This is our work. And what I hear a lot all day from my fellow white allies is, well, I don't know what that even means. What does it even mean to do the work? So my partner over here in work is Dr. Tara J, and we've spent a lot of time developing a program which I think is working, at least I hope is working. But a lot of it is around how do you not fall into that place of privilege, of entitlement, of fragility. So as a trainer, this is what I do all day, and there's a couple things that I ask people to think of, and it's the letter H, and there's 4 of them I want you to think of if you're really interested and learning exactly what you're asking us to do. First one is your head. You have to, and you've heard a lot of people up here talking about it, you have to learn in your head what another person's experience is. You have to engage in a perspective that is outside of your own. Listen, as white people, I can go back to my middle school and I can look at the history that I was taught and it was completely whitewashed. It's not my fault that I was in that middle school and that's what was taught to me, but it is now my responsibility to use my head to learn what I need to learn. So you learn. What happens when you go from learning in your head? You go to your heart. I can now empathetically understand what another person's lived experience is. I can engage in a multiple perspective. And what does that bring me to? That's your hands. You're now going to your hands. You cannot, as a white person, think, I am not going to learn anything about another person's experience. I am not going to empathetically feel it. I'm just going to step in and try to fix stuff because I think we all know in this room, what do we call that? That's when we look at white saviorism. If you cannot learn and you cannot feel, your hands are worthless. So learn your head, feel it in your heart, get to your hands. What does your hands look like? Your hands might look like, I work for public media. I probably do not need to tell anyone in this room also how much damage media has done in perpetuating what implicit bias is. We are really responsible for a lot of the harm that is out there. We can't change that unless you go through this process. The last stage, that's my favorite, healing, which is why we're here. We're looking to heal. Healing is not going to look the same for all of us. So what is your responsibility to get there? Me as a white person, healing, it's not about my fragility. It's not about me expecting somebody to do the work for me. What do you always tell me? Kim, there is Google, there is YouTube. You have a lot of resources at your fingertips to figure this stuff out. It is not on someone else's shoulders. It is on mine. It's not my fault. I was born and socialized into this. It is my fault if my fragility keeps me in the way of doing the work I need to do. But white allies, I hear you. What is the work? What is the work? This is the work. Head, heart, hands, healing. That's what you need to do. You can come visit me and Dr. J anytime. We're over at Rocky Mountain Public Media. You can listen to Kuvo Jazz. You can go to 104.7. The People Station for R&B, I got to put a shout out for us because everybody thinks public media is boring, and we're not. Right? What else you got for us?
I just don't want people to, especially white folks, to be afraid to have those conversations. Do not be afraid to ask why what I said or what I did hurt you. And if they don't want to talk about it, they don't want to have that conversation, that is also okay. It's not their responsibility. They are living their life based on their experiences. But you can go and you can educate yourself. We have the interweb at our fingertips, phones, computers, it's everywhere. There's Google, there's Amazon, there's YouTube. There's so much education out there for you to really educate and learn how to be a true, honest ally as a white person. You are gonna come across, and another thing I wanna say, you're not gonna get right the first time. This takes work. Like anything, being a good basketball player, you don't just step out on the court and you're immediately Kobe Bryant. Like, that's not how this works. It takes time. You're not gonna get it right the first time, the second time, the third, the fourth, the fifth. But if you keep trying and you keep trying and you keep working hard and educating yourself and putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations, you will get better. You will get better, and you will be a true, honest ally. So that's what I have to say to y'all. Thanks so much for having me.
I think this is a perfect transition to our next topic, and which is understanding impact. He's whispering in one ear, and he's talking in the other, and Barbara's throwing me off with her old white look right at the corner room. We want to talk about the language, and in particular the conversation. And I will frame this, I put this one out there as a topic, in particular within my foundation, where 3/4 of my staff, or my team of 50 people, are people of color, a third are queer, and I'm finding people weaponizing the language that they have used. And as much as it's progress, it's backfiring. In a recent speech I made, we had basically written the script for the right as to what they can use against us. Because I doubt if a year ago anyone would have thought that using the term critical race theory would be costing us school board races. We thought it was an educational term. And when I started talking to my staff who walked into a 20-minute late meeting on a $2 million grant, and I said, why were you late? Because the agenda is a white man's tool of oppression. I said that's also a sign of respect for people who drove across the state to meet with us to talk about a grant. When we start thinking about our language, it's appropriate to figure out the weapon and the power that it has. So we want to have Barbara lead that conversation.
All right, well, I'm going to piggyback off that. When I teach, and I teach critical race theory, by the way, day one in my history class is critical race theory. And we read about it, and then we understand it's not that scary at all. And the kids are like, oh. And last semester, Laverna, you were in that class, they had choices. I'm going sideways, Morris, because this is what you do to me. I'm sorry. I'm usually so friggin' loud, so I have to calm down. Anyway, the end of the semester, they have papers to write, and this was a U.S. history course. 3/4 of my class wrote their papers on critical race theory, and they were almost entirely all white kids. So I was very proud that they took that opportunity to delve into something that was new to them and something that they were working on with their head and their heart. So I was happy about that. I just was going to put a couple words out there. I always tell my students words have power, and words, like use the word like queer, and to me, as my generation, that was like, oh, that's such a scary word. We should not use that word. That's offensive. Also, in my generation, also, the word colored people was used. And I would always ask, and I truly would, what color are colored people? What color are we talking? Because I had crayons and I wanted to know. You know, in England, colored people are South Asians. They're Pakistani and Indian. Those are colored people. They are in South Africa too. It's very confusing. So I want to, you know, words have power. If you look at a dictionary, when we use the word black, what is in the dictionary? Well, black is not only relating to a race of people who have dark skin, but it also means very dirty, evil or wicked, very tragic or unhappy, marked by anger or hatred. I mean, this goes on and on. These are in dictionaries today, and I looked at a variety of them. So when we're looking at words and their power, we're looking at the perspective we're coming from. So queer to me may mean something different to you, and black means something different also. So that's what I kind of want to, I want people's opinions on what these words mean to them. That's kind of what I'm doing.
So,
Student in the back.
The language and talking about dictionaries were made by white people.
Exactly.
So a lot of what that, like the definition of black, is to make black people look bad and less than. You know what I mean? Because that's what that dictionary was made by white people. So that's what they thought, and that's what they wanted everybody else to.
So, just in case the audio wasn't picked up by the camera, no, you're fine. The statement was made that the dictionaries were created by white people, and that is how the negative connotation of black was placed inside of the dictionary. So that's for those of you that are watching on live, if you didn't hear that.
Right, and I'm agreeing with that, and that's why I throw it out there. Because we are still using terms that were written by old white men, mostly in Europe. These are definitions that have come down to us through our European culture. We are a European culture. We have to understand that. We're still using their racist terms. We're still using their racist ideas. So I couldn't agree more. So I'm still working on that progress, okay? I'm still working on that.
Got you. We have questions in the audience, and it's good that we have that. If you all say it, if you make it succinct, I can repeat it to make sure that it's on, that people are able to hear it. So, lady in the white sweater.
The term being, oh, we can't, there's nothing I can do about it, that's my fellow white people, right? Like, what is it that you can do? Like, can you write a letter? Can we take it to whoever it is to change those definitions? How can we, that's something that I feel, and maybe it's just me, that can be done like now. Like, we know this is a thing, how can we actually change it right now? Like, tonight, write a letter. How many signatures do we need? Whatever it is, how can we do that now?
What I do is I teach. That's what I do. That's my choice as an ally. I teach. I'm retired, and I don't stop teaching because I'm trying to give them the information so that they can become activists, so that they can question these things. So yes, and a lot of them do become activists. A lot of them do become active in politics and in racial inequality. They also become active in the gay and lesbian community. And I know there's a lot of letters, and I can't say them all, LGBTQ, I'm just sorry. But yes, that's my choice, is to teach and to get the word out. But yes, absolutely, you can show up at people's offices, you can email, you can write letters, and I've done that most of my life. So that's my choice. Other white people have to speak for themselves.
That you teach them to do, like how to actually like make those changes? Is that like something like, hey, this is who you would contact to change the definition in a dictionary? Is that something that's
I have helped people to do that if they have those questions, yes. So if they, and Laverna's been in my classes, if people ask the questions, I will absolutely try to direct them. And I'm very lucky to be at MSU because that history department, the sociology department, support this type of activity with our students. So that's, again, that's what I do. Oh, absolutely.
Demarcio,
Okay.
I want to jump into and say, you know, I had the pleasure of going to see the Exonerated Five before the pandemic happened. And one of the things that one of the folks said there was that we have to infiltrate the system. We can't just wait for white folks to change the system as well. We can't just do it on the outside either. We literally need to go in. So it's for Oxford Dictionary, since this is what we're talking about right now. We need to be in there to change that system as well. And we need to learn how to play the game. We need to be able to push it. And I appreciate, Morris, what you're saying, but another thing that we're talking about here is generational impact, right? There's a culture that is coming up that is fast and furious, and those of us who are older need to get on the bus with that, right? They are trying to say, no, I'm not dealing with this anymore. We need to change it. Yes, obviously you have a meeting, $1 million meeting or whatever, but also there's a culture there that is very much so aligned with white supremacy, and there's a culture that's trying to change that. And so it has to be infiltrating the system, changing the words so that we know that black is beautiful, black is power, black is excellence, black is everything and everything. And we need to be able to move people into the system as well to continuously change the system. It's not just one teacher that's like doing this, right? I think that's the thing. And I'm not saying the people in this room, right? But there's a lot of folks who are just waiting for somebody to make the change, and we are that change. We are. And young people, during the Black Lives Matter marches that have been happening, they have been making brutal changes. And we need to get on top of that, right? Because that's it. There's nothing else to it. We need to get on or get off the bus because they're not waiting for us. So
I wanted to chime into your question too, and because it's not, obviously not everybody's going to have access to sit in your classroom. So, but if you are interested in, as a white person, right, and you're like, I want to be a part of this change, and you're going again, head, heart, hands. One of the things with your hands, and I find with a lot of white people that are in training with me, this is the thing you have to realize. This isn't something that lies outside of you, it's something that is lying within you. You have to be able to take a deep introspective look into yourself to understand your own participation with white supremacist culture. You have to accept it and you have to work on it every day. You were born into it. It's not your fault you were born into it. It is your fault if you continue to ignore it and if you let your fragility be the thing that keeps you from dismantling it. So while it is the job of all of us, there is a co-responsibility in it, but that doesn't mean that the responsibility is the same. So that's a lot of the conversation I know Dr. J and I have with people through our training. How can you keep doing that look into yourself? What do I need to take responsibility for? What do I need to change? I can't wait for someone else to do it. And we have to do it together. There's no one person that can change it.
Yep. So I definitely agree that there's not one person that can change it. And we also have to look at this from a pragmatic point of view. Look at it from a pragmatic point of view as well. We did not get into this overnight. It's not going to change overnight. But we do have the technology, the history, the information to expedite the process out. But we also have to remain vigilant because our language, our key codes, our decoder ring is out there in order to stop the progress. You said, how do we change the history books or how do we change the dictionary? We actually have people right now using our political system to make it illegal to do these type of things for her to teach a class, for a teacher to teach a class, to take part in their civics. So your first step is sometimes your hardest step, but your first step is always your closest step. You have to get involved at any type of level that you can get involved at. So we're going to go over here to our panel, and then we have a question out in the audience after that.
I just want to give a comment on critical race theory and just maybe to look at the viewpoint. I think sometimes critical race theory gets labeled as one thing or another. And the issue, at least my issue with critical race theory, is I think we need to be careful when we are talking, especially to young people, that we don't deliver to them these messages of victimhood and oppression and not also give them a message of optimism, a message of empowerment. When I was young, we were taught, that we can do anything we want. We can become anything we want. And when the message is that of oppression, I think it stifles some young people, and that's kind of the problem. When I like I said, looking at my family, I know the struggle my grandparents went through to make my parents' life better. I know the struggle my parents went through to make my life better. And I know that I look back, and I'm not ignorant of what happened to my ancestors. I know we were screwed, to put it very lightly. But I also know that them seeing and I'm going to use the word you use, the progress we've made to today, they would not want me to carry the burden of their oppression today. And also on the flip side, I don't think, or I would not want any young white person to be taught that they are an oppressor because of what their ancestors did. Because I also know that what happened with my ancestors, we did some terrible things to the Arapaho, the Blackfoot, the Cheyenne, the Comanche, and the Sioux. Our tribe is the one that led the army to the Sioux because we wanted them to take them out. It's like, there they are, go get them, take them out. I don't want to bear the guilt of the sins of my ancestors either. And so the issue is I don't want to create a situation where we have people feeling that they are automatically oppressors and other people feeling that they are automatically oppressed when we should be giving young people messages of empowerment. And yes, we do want to teach them history, but we still can look at history from a bigger picture. I think a lot of times we do kind of focus on certain things in history rather than, like teaching larger picture history. And so it's not really the history, because I think we should learn history, but it's, again, the messaging behind it. Are we trying to create division? Like, I don't want young brown people to feel like they're oppressed and the whole world's against them just because of the color of their skin. What's that going to do to a young person if they feel the world is against them? They're going to stop trying. And I've seen it happen in my community where young people feel like they cannot accomplish anything because the world is against them. And I also wouldn't, like I said, if you're white, you're not automatically racist. You're not automatically an oppressor. And I wouldn't want a white kid or any white person to feel like they have to bear the guilt of their ancestors.
I'm going to jump in right quick.
Right.
And
So that's just my thought there.
I have to ask a question.
And I'm sure there will be a lot.
Do you understand the word gaslighting? No. I want to be clear. Like, if you know me, you understand me asking that question was not an attack. I'm not attacking right now. I'm just asking a simple question if you understand the word gaslighting.
I am aware of that term.
Okay.
I know what it means.
And that's awesome that you do, because you can't say out of one part of your mouth, we have to teach history, then on the other part of your mouth, give this whole other thing to whitewash and to minimalize what has happened in history. So the fact that I don't have a six-pack is because the history of what I've done before, the lack of dieting, the lack of exercise, that's how I'm here now. How we have these things of how you and I, who are both non-white, would be still treated differently if District 6 officers approached us on the street. Now, you and I would still be treated differently than someone who is white that is approached by a District 6 officer on the street. Were they born owning slaves? Were they born raiding tribes of native people? No. But it's the things of history that have set up the foundation on how people are treated with access. So I think you do us a disservice by being here and not being completely truthful. So they say a half-truth is a full lie, right? And even when you talk about the whole thing of the Redskins,
yes,
if we're going to discuss race and a critical thing to understand the theory, we have to dive into the whole thing that the GOP is pushing back against us from doing. If we're supposed to understand it from your viewpoint, correct?
I don't know what you're getting at right there.
It was a yes or no. I wasn't getting at anything. But
well, to purely just state
no.
it, I am not a victim and I am not oppressed.
You're not
right
a
now, as an
victim.
American in 2022, I am capable as a brown person to do anything a white person can do. Like, I don't feel like I
all right, so
am
do you
suppressed.
understand the term
in that way.
redlining? Do you understand how home loans are given out? Do you understand how car loans are given out? Do you understand how students are evaluated to get student loans, how that's given out? These are all things that I can walk into, but based upon the color of my skin, I'm treated differently. My name is Hashim. On my application to apply for a job, I am treated differently based upon my name, if I even make it to a selection process. There are studies that show that a white man with a felony has a better opportunity and makes more money on average than my black self with a degree and no felony makes. I don't control that, but that's just the way the society is. I can believe that I am a size 28 in my waist, but if the fact is, that's not the case. While I don't feel like I'm a victim, I can be victimized at any given time. Period. So we're gonna go ahead and get the question from the audience, from someone that had. Just hold your hand up for me. Oh, you good? You want to take this to them? Over here.
I have a question. I believe that Caucasianism is expanding because I work at Denver Health, and now when we check people in, Mexican, Hispanic, and all that is under Caucasian. It's Caucasian, Latino, like you're either non-Hispanic or Hispanic, but you're still Caucasian under the check-in. The only separate is Black, and then they have Pacific Islander. So, I mean, it's easy to say that you're not oppressed, and you're not. In most cases, you fall under Caucasian. There is no other way for a Black person to fall under Caucasian in any study, in any type of way that they give out funds or anything. So I don't really understand your perspective about not being oppressed when the reality is we are oppressed. And I don't teach my child to necessarily walk around like, oh, I came from slavery, I'm gonna have a sad day. But she's very aware that she's not. I live in Parker amongst a lot of privileged people, but she's very aware that her struggle is different. Regardless of what she does, she's noticed because she's one of 4 Black kids in her school. She is the only Black kid with a dance solo. Like, she notices all those things. It's not about being oppressed. It's about what her reality is. When kids get in trouble at school, they will notice if my kid does something before they notice the other 300 white kids doing something, because she stands out, not just physically, but just reality. So I don't really understand your comment, and I'd actually like to hear you explain, what do you mean not live under oppression when the reality is we are oppressed? Like, that's the reality. Now, we can be positive and have hope and progress and change and so forth, but we are oppressed. And I just need you to explain that. I feel like other people kind of were like, what is going on?
No, that's fine. That's a good question. And kind of what I'm talking about that is, like we were talking about earlier, there's this thing of unconscious bias. There was one time I was in Target and I suddenly felt very uncomfortable, and it was because, and I thought about it, why do I feel uncomfortable? And it's because I realized I was the only non-white person in the entire store. And so I felt uncomfortable. I started to just get a little nervous. But then I thought about it, and I was like, nobody there had done anything to me. No, everyone in there was completely nice to me, completely respectful. So this unconscious bias was my bias against white people. And I know people feel like you can't be racist against white people, but you can. And I think today there's a lot of racism against white people. Especially culturally, I feel like white people often face more racism than us people of color face. I feel like that happens. So when I'm talking about me not being oppressed, I'm talking about that as a brown child who grew up in the United States, I was capable of becoming anything any one of my white classmates were capable of becoming. I feel like I have a...
Hold on, everybody, right quick. I understand this is a passionate topic, but you have to listen for the triggers. And sometimes people say things to get other people triggered to help prove a point. Sometimes they do not. Sometimes this is the work that we have to do just to hear people out. Bottom line. So I'll no, you're good. everybody's good actually, but I just don't want it to. I don't want it to spin into a narrative of where one person's being attacked, because we're all on a spectrum here as it relates to our beliefs. And I definitely know that I am far left of where he's saying, but I think it's also important, as someone said, you have to hear them out, right? We said this earlier with the council culture. We have to hear them out. I listen to them from a tactical standpoint so I can poke holes into it. But sometimes you have to just let it go out so that society can just hear where the people are coming from, and that way it helps you navigate where you need to go, whether that's left or to the right. So, yeah. So
I'll finish up really quick, and I don't feel like anyone was attacking me. I love all of you. We're all here. We're all great people. My point was just that I feel like we should be, like I said, when I was in school, I feel like the message always was, you can be anything you want. This country is a land of opportunity. People risk their lives to be here. And when you talk to them, they talk about why they're so happy to be here, to have this opportunity, no matter where they came from. Look at Nigerians who moved to this country are extremely successful because they're able to take care of that, are able to take advantage of that opportunity. So all I was saying is I don't feel like I'm a victim or oppressed, because I, as a brown man, am capable of accomplishing anything a white man is capable of accomplishing. And that's a message I just want to get out to people. That's it.
So thank you very much for that. And the Nigerians are able to do this today because of the work that the Nigerians did back in 1600, 1700, 1800, 1900. But no, awesome. And I also think I will take that as your endorsement for Kamala Harris for president, by supporting black people to be anything that they want to be, right? All right. So we do have another question over here.
I have questions for the two of you. My first question is, as I heard something earlier that kind of like, I don't know, hit me to the heart. One, I will say I have had the privilege of a black individual to be able to be in certain circles because of my background and because of how I speak. But because of that, I've also heard things from white folks as, oh, you're different from the others. And to me, it's not a choice for me to just choose to do one thing. So I ask you, why do you think you, as a white individual who has more privilege at the end of the day than even I do, to just choose to just teach? Like, when there's so many other revenues out there that need to happen to actually help. Because we can keep teaching for years on what has happened in our systems, but what are we doing to act on it? That's my first question.
Hello. Did you break this? He did. As I'm saying, that is just my choice. That is my choice. I activate my students. That is my choice. That is my calling. I also do political action. I'm in the streets a lot. When I teach critical race theory, I don't talk about people as victims, and I certainly don't ask the white students if they feel sad because I'm talking about critical race theory. We talk about history. We talk about reality. People that look like me committed atrocious crimes. People that look like all of us have committed atrocious crimes, and they need to be told. So that is my choice. If I'm not doing enough, then perhaps I should rethink and try other things, and I take your point. But that's what I do now, and I feel like I've empowered a lot of students to go further and to ask questions, to seek the truth. So that's my thing, okay? It doesn't have to be everybody's. But I don't worry about my white students and their, again, I wasn't a slave owner. My people were,
It's not about you being a slave owner. It's not about you worrying and coddling white students.
I don't.
It's the thought process as you have that privilege to have a choice. I never had a choice to get arrested when I was playing chess in a park with someone, all because I was minding my own business and I was a person of color. Might not have been in Denver, but it was in Louisville, Kentucky, and they are very oppressed.
I'm from
So why do
Cincinnati.
you
I
feel-
understand that.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I'm trying to understand, why do you think as a white individual that you have that privilege to have that choice? I didn't have a choice in a lot of things. I had to fight for a lot of things. So
I
with
understand that. I
you
didn't,
just
and
you're choosing to do one thing. I get that.
That's correct.
But why?
Because that's what I do. That's who I am. I am a teacher, and that's what I do. That's my gift. That's my calling. That's what I've said before. That's what I do to make the world. I try. Laverna's been my student several times, to make the world a better place. That's what I try to do. I try to tell the truth. I do not apologize for my white privilege. It is, again, I didn't choose that, but I try to use it. I use the education that I got to try to enable students to seek the truth.
Okay. Well, we'll just move on from that.
Okay.
My one question is for the gentleman right here, real quick. I got you in a hat too, because I have a question for you. I got everybody. As a person that in certain regions you can pass for white. If we're down in Florida right now, you can pass for white. But if you're up like in Atlanta, you might not. My question is to you: why do you think it's okay because it didn't affect you? Do you think it's okay because it didn't affect you to assume that everybody else is just oppressed and learning the history is going to oppress them? And I don't hate you for it. This is an eye-opening subject. So why do you think it's okay?
Maybe I misstated that. I think we should teach history. I want people to know about slavery in the South. I want people to know about what happened to the Native Americans, and they should know who did it. It's just, I think we also have to learn that, like I said, there are bigger things. There's a big picture with this stuff. Like, do we teach about the trans-Mediterranean slave trade, or the Indian-Mexican slave trade, or a lot of these other slave trades, to see that this was a human issue. Slavery was a human issue. Oppression is a human issue. I believe if you're alive today, at some point your ancestor did something terrible to survive. So we do need to teach history. And really, I can't speak for anyone but myself. So I'm not saying you're all not oppressed and you're all not victims. I'm speaking, I'm not a victim and I'm not oppressed.
So, all right, we're gonna do yes. I have to address these things as they come across. Slavery has been around for a long time before chattel slavery was created. But we have to understand that the slavery that happened on this land as it relates to Africans that were stolen from the continent is chattel slavery, which is completely different, right? So when I hear this argument come from the GOP often, that's when you put a little bit of truth wrapped in a whole bunch of lie. Like, it gets really toxic on that. So I just need to make sure that there's a clear distinction on that. And if we actually taught critical race theory, we would learn those type of things. And I have to be clear as well, critical race theory is not taught in K through 12. It is not. If they say it, they are a lie. And their mama is too. No, but yeah, they're a lie. And the mama might be. But so there is a question from online. And there's talk online, the question state, the number was 9359. We're gonna get to your question right now. They stated that there is a difference between individual oppression and between systemic oppression. And Nadine, I'm gonna give it over to you. If you would like to, can you explain the difference between individual oppression and systemic oppression?
No. I don't understand the question on the individual oppression. I think that this is a system of oppression. We are living in a system of oppression. We have been taught, we talk about history, and the reality is that we were all taught manifest destiny. Manifest destiny was for cisgender, heterosexual, white men. They were manifested a destiny in this country. Everybody else was taught that we were supposed to bow down and move underneath them. That's it. That is oppression. We've never been, no one in my classrooms, and I don't know about you, Valdemar, but from my classroom, no one was talking about the history, the positive side of blackness. No one was talking about the positive side of Native Americans. No one was, what I was taught was that Native Americans were savages. And I was taught that Asian folks kindly worked on the railroads. Like, that is oppression. Like, to not tell a whole truth, to not tell us all of like the entire history, to not tell women how they had impacted history, that is oppression. You know what I mean? And to continue to perpetuate that is systemic. And I guess if you're an individual doing that, then you're an individual creating systemic oppression. So I think that's what the issue is. Like, I get it. Like, I totally understand that you believe in freedom. I believe in freedom too. I want the freedom to rock down the street with my wife without anybody arresting me. My nephew was 11, 12 years old a few years ago, right here in Stapleton, where he got held up by police, rolled up to him, 4 police cars, holding him up to guns because somebody thought he had a gun and his friends had a gun. That is unacceptable, right? That's not freedom. So, like, the thing is like, you're talking about your people, and I don't know, I'm just talking about what you said, like, around reservations, like, living on a reservation and being forced to live on the reservation in this vast land when indigenous people breathed with this earth, they breathed with this earth, that's not a freedom. And the history was not taught about that. So that all of that is oppression to me. That is all systemic. And we have a long way to go until that is changed. So I get you, man. Like, I don't want to feel oppressed. I don't want to feel like a victim. I'm not a fucking victim. I'm here because I fought really hard to be here. But the reality is that the fact that I had to fight that hard is because of systemic oppression and patriarchy. And we can't separate that out. Like, you're a beautiful human, I feel it, and also I think maybe your journey is different, and I applaud that, but that freedom is not everybody's freedom. You know what I'm saying? And so we've got a long way to go from that. I don't know if that answers the question,
No,
but
it
that's
did.
what I'm saying, so.
All right, so I would just like to acknowledge a black woman for dropping the mic. and that is going to be it for us tonight, right? Just for the sake of time. So we have 2 other things before we wrap up. But as we transition away from our panel, I just want to be clear that we've heard a lot of stuff here, right? And hopefully your minds are opened up to new thinking or to deeper thinking. And hopefully everyone is encouraged, leaving from here tonight, learning a little bit more. No matter if you have 3 PhDs behind your name, there's still more that you can learn. Also, understand that sometimes, as it relates to counsel culture, you might have to counsel somebody for a period of time in order to maintain your peace. Understand that self-preservation is the first law of survival. So I'd like to thank our panelists for being here. And I will turn it back over to our host.
Again, let's thank our panelists for taking time to be out here. Certainly, let's thank Hashim for being our MC. We're going to wrap this up again. My name is Morris Price, and we're up to Nadine's point regarding the role of individuals in this change. This was just one thing we would hopefully accomplish as a conversation. The protest is an episodic moment in the pipeline of change. But if you don't think that advocacy, being in the room when policies are set are important, trust me, it is. There are plenty of people who don't want you in that room, and they're going to make those policies. I'd rather have your lone voice in that room versus the man that says, you know, I had a black roommate once, and here's what he would have done. So I'm going to ask you, go into the fray. If you join a committee and you see there's only white people, join the committee. If you walk into a room and you're the only black woman, be the only black woman in the room. Because they're going to make a decision about a policy that impacts your community. I'd rather your voice than no voice. And to Nadine, my sister, I am 6 years younger than Ruby Bridges, if y'all know who Ruby Bridges is. So don't discount too quickly where people are in this age spectrum. I respect the young people that are out there protesting. Hashim's one of my best friends. There is nothing about me and Hashim on that spectrum that's the same. I'm not a frontline activator. I'm not protesting. I don't look good in handcuffs, and I damn sure don't look good getting arrested. But I know where my power is inside of a boardroom when money starts flowing, when politicians start talking. I want to make sure they hear that voice, and each of you has a role in that process, so don't minimize it. The next thing we want to do is make sure you let us know if this worked for you, if this is one of the conversations we want to continue. This is a community conversation, and I took the power. I'm gonna thank Ball for being here. He wasn't naive. He knew what was gonna happen when he got on that stage. But I want to thank him for bringing that perspective because it's healthy for to know what's out there. And if this works for you, please let us know because we want to again thank Sage. I'm going to pass it to Marcio, then Sage, to let them know this is the kind of conversation we want to have in community. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to pass it to Marcio.
Thank you. Well, we know how to make you forget it's 7 degrees outside, don't we? It's hot in here. It is hot in here. Again, special thanks to our panelists, the bar staff, Chris, who helped us with AV. Our performers, yes, Evie Otley, Samora, thank you so much. And special thanks to the guy who gave Morris and I a call 2 months ago, and he said, I have an idea. And Morris and I listened, and this is the first of many chapters, I feel, of that idea. It's having a conversation with individuals that you may not see every day, you may not agree with, but you can take just a minute to understand the perspective and how they walk in their shoes. And like the song says, tomorrow starts with me and you and you and you. And with that, I'd like to thank Sage Gray for hosting us in Lucid Denver. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you guys all for being here, and you guys for volunteering your time and giving different perspectives. I know it's not an easy conversation, but that's the point. I mean, when I was working with Sexual Assault Services Organization, answering those phone calls from 60, 70-year-old women who can't talk to anybody. And it's because they don't talk about things that are difficult. We have to talk about things that are difficult in order to grow. So I really appreciate you guys all coming, and I do want to continue conversations like this here at Lucid. And thank you two so much for being in my lives because you inspire me every day. But really, it's just talk about the hard things because that's how we grow. And I'm super grateful that you guys were all here. And to the point that Nadine said earlier about, I think you said, like, get on the bus and, learn the system. I was so excited to see BLM surge during COVID, but I want to make sure that we inspire them to actually learn the system and go actually participate in the right ways, because just going out and yelling is not going to help if you don't know what you're talking about and you can't have a conversation around it. It's like not voting, So I appreciate you guys all for being here. Thank you, Tamara, for running camera, and Chris, and all my staff. But enjoy the rest of your night. We have Juicy's Jukebox coming up, which is the 3rd series of the drag show by Juicy Misdemeanor, and that's spilling the tea on Black history. So stick around, have some cocktails, and we hope to see you guys soon.